Three Division 3 Nationals 2021 was the first time we saw a 13-meter board and triple all year at the D3 level, and most guys fouled their first one or two jumps. And then on the women's side, the D3 record holder fouled out, and it was a targeting steering thing, because
Yeah.
you went from 36-foot and 40-foot boards to the only board on the track was either an 11-meter board or a 13-meter board, which threw off everybody's depth perception.
Yeah.
So
So I actually talked to Paf about that. I asked him a question about when we get into outdoors, we're very accurate indoors. Once we get into outdoors, we always have a problem with uh being on the board. And I chalked it up to multiple factors of like wind conditions, being faster on the runway, having the depth perception,
yeah.
and not like for the athletes needing more time on the runway to understand what it feels like visually, and having such a variety throughout the tracks. Because usually indoors,
Oh,
it's like for the most part you're in the center of the track.
yeah.
It's rare to see an out, for us in our conference. But
Yeah.
and then he just flat out goes, no, it's just you're not drilling the mid mark and the steering and targeting enough outdoors then, because it's a different beast. He said it. It's like, yeah, there is different depth perception, but you need to do those drilling and or you need to keep drilling the mid mark and steering and targeting drills outdoors, because you
Yeah.
could do it all you want indoors, but then once you get outdoors, you need a whole nother slew of drills to get that to be accurate there.
Does he drill them on a mid mark? Does he put a tape down for them at a mid mark, or does he just say tape,
He
because tape's on
does.
the side? It has to be on the side of the runway,
Yeah. He
so they
uses,
can't
I'm pretty sure, just the example that he was given, he had a Paralympic athlete that he was working with, and he had a mid mark for a Paralympic athlete. It wasn't quite a mid mark. It was like, I think 3 strides before before the board, three
okay.
takeoff legs before before the board.
Yeah,
And this guy was coming in from 9 strides, so 6 strides or 3 strides before the board
sure.
was the mark. But still, there was a mark there that he could tell if the kid was going to be off or not.
It was for
And
it was for him, not the athlete.
it was made, yeah, it was for him, so
Okay,
that
okay.
he could see if the kid where the kid was at, and then he could target, talking about, well, what is he doing in the dry phase and the upright phase, and how is he transitioning. So it was more so for him than the athlete to see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I often haven't done at this level, which I'm considering next year, trying to figure out, is that something that we have to start doing outdoors, is a mid mark, just because um, we spend so much time indoors just understanding rhythm and
Yeah.
understanding how to transition from an actual drive phase. And it's not because you see, like, in these a lot of these high school kids, they're like, all right, just hit it from the start as
Yeah,
fast as you
yeah.
can go, and just go. And I've never really taught my girls to do that. I've always taught them that it needs to be powerful, but it can't be it needs to be more power out of the back rather than just like, let's hit top speed and just spin your wheels at the start and then you die out at the end.
Yeah. I do I started a 2-meter mark outdoors. A big reason for that though is, like, Dan Paff talks about, like, Rutherford had a 230 penultimate. Every now and then he'd have like a 2.3-meter penultimate, and he's like, that's way
Yeah.
too long. I put a 2-meter mark down, and I have women who are 220, 230 penultimate to board because they're pushing so hard. So so I started doing a 2-meter mark because I think I only get one coach's mark. And I was like, well, if I only get one, that's the one I need right now.
Yeah.
Because we're too horizontal on that last step. Sink in, drive in, and then not able to drive out of it, or losing all of our
Yeah.
speed, that I'm able to say, like, you got to tighten these up. Like, so, yeah, I do 2-meter mark because, like, one day I hope to get to six stride out, but I'm like, I don't know, those last two, they're still not good. So that's
Yeah.
but that's the thing. We're gonna I have a nice kind of setup of I'm putting my horizontal jumpers, my vertical jumpers. I'm kind of breaking one of my rules, and I'm gonna have vertical jumpers go on drill on Monday. Normally we do Monday as like a rust buster.
Yeah.
I think it's high school level. Um, you hear a lot about like folks in the area, speed-based folks in the area who are like, Monday's your freshest day.
Yeah.
I think you could maybe make a pretty good case for us at the high school level, but I think at the college level, I don't think that's reality. Um, Coming off of like a Saturday track meet, that's, anywhere from on a short day, you're gone for 8 or 9 hours. Um, on a long day, you're on a bus at like 7 a.m. and back at 11 p.m. And then you get Sunday to recover, but you're doing homework. So I think Monday can be a little bit of a rust buster. So I historically have always said we don't do very neural stuff on Monday. We try to like work into the week, but I'm breaking that rule just from a logistics standpoint to say my high jumpers just need a little more focus this week.
Yeah.
Because I think if we go to theme of the conversation today, which is what did we do right and what did we do wrong, when it comes to high jump last year, I think I did everything wrong. When it comes to horizontal jumps, I think I got a lot. I think if you ask me my list of wrong versus right in any event, the wrong is going to be a much longer list,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
at least got more right in the horizontal jumps
Yeah.
than the vertical jumps.
I
So
actually,
I'm going to break a rule this year, and we're going to maybe not be high neural, but we're certainly drilling the high jump on Monday
yeah.
from a logistics standpoint, so I can spend time with both jump events Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting you brought that up because I was having a conversation with Andy Dirks. He's the Plainfield North
yeah,
head cross country coach and whatnot. So he and we sat down and had a conversation, and I was telling him about just asking him about what the distance program that I put together looks like and what criticism he has on it, and constructive, of course. And he
destructive
said,
criticism.
yeah, right. He said the same thing. He said it's like put your hard days on Mondays as like that's your freshest. Personally, anecdotally, I have not seen that. I'm in the same situation you are. These kids come in on a Monday having come off of a weekend of relaxation, quote unquote, right? If we compete on a Saturday, totally different. We're not going to do anything hard on a Monday.
Yeah,
We'll do it on a Tuesday. But if we competed on a Friday, they had all their homework they're catching up on. Sunday, they don't do anything, right? Which to me is like the worst primer. And then
yeah,
Monday they come in and they're flat. So we for the sprint side uh for the horizontal jumps because we're sharing it with the boys, we um we had to do stuff on Mondays because logistically we only had the pit Monday Wednesdays
yeah,
and they were doing Tuesday Thursdays. And then same with high jump. Monday, Wednesday, or no, I'm sorry, Tuesday, Thursdays was high jump for them. So they had to jump Tuesday, Thursday. But
right.
I felt the same. They came in flat. It didn't look like they were going to do anything. So we would always push neural days to Tuesdays, which kind of lined up with what I wanted. And you and I talked about this earlier, like probably preseason, where our highest neural day was going to be Friday throughout preseason and going into indoors because
Yeah,
you usually compete Friday, Saturday, somewhere in that
yeah,
range. So if I can have a neural day on Tuesday, neural day on Friday, and then fill in the rest with some like acceleration circuits or like, some sort of tempo and whatever, that Monday then becomes easy to prime them for that Tuesday.
yeah,
But so he
yeah.
said, he's like, well, do a hard day on Monday. I'm like, I just don't think that they're that fresh as
Well,
much as people say they're fresh.
I'd be interested to know, is there a difference? Like when he says hard day, like let's be contextual about it.
Yeah. And I think that's where the difference is.
Cross country
Right.
distance, are we talking something different? Because I
Yeah.
do recall I did that as a coaching high school distance runners too. But the hard day was, you get a warm up in, you run a few strides to like potentiate, I
Yeah.
don't think I knew that word at the time. And then, you're running 300s, 400s,
Yeah.
something like that versus I think, I don't, I think you're talking, the differences are so big that I don't think you have to be like ultra primed
Yeah.
to run several hard twos, 250s, threes, fours. Um, you can grind those out.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
you're not grinding out a fly 10. That's just not happening. You're there or you're not. So um
And
I'd be
that's
curious
where,
to like contextually.
yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think it is in regards, we were talking about it in hard. It was one of those things last year when I started with the cross country boys. I was talking to, do you know who Carrie Lane is? She's a strength conditioning
Yes.
coach slash,
Under Armour,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. She works with the Baltimore, a middle distance crew in
Yeah.
Baltimore. Um, and she put it into really good. She's like, you're thinking in terms of sprints.
Yeah.
A hard day for cross country guys is not a neural day.
Yeah.
They do intervals. That's their hard day. So it's way more aerobic work than it is neural. So you can double that up. It's like you can go back to back on what they consider hard with a
Yeah.
neural day because it's thinking intensive tempo or extensive tempo really and neural. You could back those up in a sprints workout. That's fine. So I think that's where
Yeah.
he made that statement. For me, what I was pitching to him was the fact that the sprints and the distance crew would train together on those intensive and extensive and neural days. So if I lined up those 3 days, a a longer duration run that's like a fartlek or a long run or anything like that can replace the acceleration day that I would have on a Monday. So that's where we
Mhm.
were like, all right, we're going to get out and we're going to do 45 minutes worth of work, aerobic work, but there's going to be like surges in there and various
Yeah.
tempo changes while the sprint crew is doing like pure acceleration work and understanding those mechanics. And then Tuesday we can come back and both we can hit something intense. And then Wednesday separate again. Then Thursday come back and hit something intense together. Friday together, and then Saturday again separate. So
Yeah.
that's the context of what I was saying to him. And I think he just logistically that's how I set it up. But he was just looking at it as the distance part of it.
Yeah. I think it's it's amazing to me that the longer I'm in this job and in this field, and the more coaches I talk to, the more I'm like, yeah, we live in a world of I'm gonna write what's perfect,
Yeah,
and then by the time I get through like what is logistically possible,
yeah, 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 yeah.
it doesn't look
Totally.
even close to the
No,
same.
totally different. Yeah,
So it feels like who's the Peter Jackson movie? Yeah, my edition of the Peter Jackson movie is like 4 hours long, but to actually release it in theaters, I had to knock it down to an hour 45
yeah, yeah,
with a
yeah,
lot of stuff on the cutting room floor.
yeah,
Similar deal here. The summer, I love the summer where I'm running 10-day cycles and I'm like, this is amazing. And I've spent the last 8 weeks, every single week, I'm like, how am I gonna take these 10-day cycles? Because I really like spreading density out.
yeah.
Um, how am I going to take these 10-day cycles and fit them into their their class schedule? Like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, we have to be off on NCAA says we need 1 day off minimum. So we take Sunday off. It's just that's
Yeah,
our team. Sunday is just it's a no-go zone. For me, my family as well is important.
yeah.
And then I try to include a day off in in the middle of the week that might be it's an optional day. We have these restrictions on how many days we can train all fall or all season. And the way we do it is we space it out like, okay, I have 4 practices a week. that I can use, or I could start later and have 6 a week, but I would rather start earlier and spread them out.
Yeah,
Like, how am
absolutely.
I going to fit 10 days of workouts into like a 2 week cycle? And I was just like, I can't, it doesn't fit. So I'm like, all right, so 10 days all summer because it's wonderful and I love it. And then once school starts, we're in 7 day cycles again because that's what works.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so why not lengthen it even further? Go to like the what Ralph Oman does and go to a 21-day cycle. And at least within 21 days, you can build in like a number of different capacity days and neural days and whatnot.
uh, I think the biggest reason is, uh, a little bit of laziness. From
That's not how I'd describe you at all, but please elaborate.
the the idea that, because I thought of, if I go 2 week cycle, what am I gonna do in 2 weeks that I'm not gonna do in 7 days over 2 weeks? And it's really, I'm gonna space stuff out so much at that point. But for me, the big thing is I really prefer to give the athletes the comfort of knowing you're a high jumper, you are jumping on Wednesday.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they've I've done this in the past where we kind of like run a rollover schedule. Um and I think I love rollover schedules. I think that's like one of those, like, in our perfect world, we run a rollover schedule and
Hmm.
then throw days in there when we need it based on the individual. And it was like, but 28 jumpers, like, that's not happening.
Yeah,
Um, Especially when I have to tell the NCAA they took a day off today.
yeah,
You know, I have to report days off. And so it's sort of a, do I want to go through, take attendance at every meet and then like log on and do all that stuff. But also I'm a planner when it comes to track because that's just how I am as a person. I'm really bad at planning. So I work really hard on planning.
yeah. I
And
know what you
like,
mean.
takes a lot of time. And I want to be able to tell my high jumpers we're going to jump on Wednesday, so they know. And I've just seen, like, when they show up on a Wednesday and they're like, "All right, we're jumping today," and I'm like, "No, we jumped on Wednesday last week. We're jumping on Friday this week and jumping on Tuesday next week." Um, they don't prefer that,
Yeah,
and I sort of have like one less fight, please.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
you know,
No, that I get totally.
so it's more of a, what do I have to report to the NCAA? What do I have to report to my department? When we schedule facilities, you know, I kind of have to be clear about, I'm going to be jumping indoors on this day. So if basketball is in there, they know, I'm not going to bring my whole team in. I'm just going to bring a small group in. Or
Hmm.
so from a scheduling standpoint, everything has to be done so far in advance that it's the idea of going through every single day for 3 weeks and being like, all right, there's one 3 week cycle,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
log back
yeah,
in and rinse and repeat. I think that for me, uh, it's not great. But I do think I do a 3 week mezzo
okay.
still, and then what I'll do is I'll flip out. So they might do plyos on Friday, and week one of the mezzo will be extensive plyos. Or what am I doing? No, week one for like a long triple. Week one of the mezzo will be on Friday. Will be intensive plyos. Week two will be extensive plyos. Week three on Friday will be testing.
And
So
are we talking fall? Is this
yeah, yeah,
preseason? Okay.
yeah. So yeah, my brain's like stuck on fall right now.
Yeah.
So like we started like reaching into January today, and January, February schedules. I was like, I can't do it. So well, I want to know, can you, this is uncomfortable for, I think, people like us. Can you go down your list of wins this year? Like, what were your big wins for the track season?
Yeah.
You got a couple
Um,
school records.
yeah. So
Okay.
we hit a lot of our indoor records went down. no outdoor record. Well, our 4x1 outdoor record went down. Um, we were 4/10 away from our outdoor 4x2.
Oh, nice.
I think 4/10, eight, no, 8/10. Um, but as successful as we were, there were some like shit. I could have done X, Y, and Z better. As we get into outdoors, I always like I'm very tentative with my outdoor um, training. I err on the side of caution, and this year I was like, you know what? We got to go a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. We have one girl who's a tremendous 400-meter runner, but she also plays lacrosse, and managing her volume all outdoor season is really tough, especially like just the mental side of it, needing to understand that when she goes and plays a game, there's a fatigue factor that you can't fit. That's not physical; it's a mental and emotional fatigue
Yeah.
factor, and playing that into it all. So right when we got outdoors, she hit like come back from our spring break, and I we give kids off, so optional practice. They can come and they can train, um, but majority of the kids will train on their own. We give them a program to do. I anticipate most kids do not do it. So when we get outdoors, it's kind of like a refresh. We had
Yeah.
just finished in like our Illinois top times the week before, and then they have a week off, which I love personally because it's like a mental reset. And then we've got 7 weeks leading into state. So I start from scratch basically, as if as if the kids had come off of a week of doing zero work. So it takes us
Yeah.
3 weeks to get back into it. But that following week is a pretty big invite. It's one of our bigger invites that we go to. So week off, then they come back, and we're into competition again. That following week we have a relay meet on the first Thursday, and then the week after that we have two meets, a Tuesday and a Friday. So essentially, that whole week is like there's no real training going on except for some acceleration work, some mechanics, getting back into top end speed because we compete Thursday. We'll run some XV on that Saturday, come back on Tuesday, and then we compete on Tuesday, and then compete on Friday. So, there's
Yeah.
four neural days in there, and there's the let's call them intensive tempo days on the competition. So the highest stimulus possible. And she came in, had already played a full tournament on the weekend before, so six
Mm.
lacrosse games over the course of 2 days, played
Oh,
or like five lacrosse games over the course of 2 days, ran on that Tuesday, which I should have just pulled her out. That was my fault. So that was a miss. I should have just been like, no, but she hadn't really trained. She's a girl that would definitely train on her own, but it's different, right? You're not going to
yeah. Yeah.
be, when you're on vacation, you're not training as hard as you would with your teammates. So, um, leading into outdoor season, I'm like very usually on the minimal side of how hard or how much are we training. This year, I pushed it further. So rather than leading into the season, leading into state, I trained straight through conference. Did not care about conference at one bit. Came into our sectional meet, had a pretty good execution. I was very focused on our 4x1 because we were in a position to do well. And
Hmm.
with the squad we had, we just were running that well. And then because I knew that I wasn't going to race my top girl in the 4x2, and I wasn't going to race that 400-meter runner because of the 400s right after the 4x2 at this level. So
Hmm.
she wasn't going to run sectionals or state. So I'm like, this 4x2 is you guys are going to have to do it alone. So leading into the end of the year, it's like, all right, I think we're in a good position. We kind of trained through, and I'm training for the finals state meet. She ends up running only 3/10 faster than she did indoors. So she went 57.77 indoors, and then she went 57.4 in prelims at state. And that's where I was kind of shocked. She didn't make finals. I was shocked that I anticipated that she would be at 56.8 by the end of the season.
Hmm.
So is it that we didn't do enough volume? Is it that she had this huge stimulus in the start of the indoor season and she just didn't have enough time to recover from it? Um, but then she was on our 4x1. Our 4x1 ran the fastest time we've ever run with 47.5. And then a lot of the other girls, and I'm talking like only my top girls now. There was a
Yeah.
lot of success in the rest of the team, but we got to look at all the way through May. So I just constantly think about it, like, do I add more volume in early outdoors so that she can have a little bit less so uh, let me rephrase that. Do I change the type of volume she runs,
Yeah.
less intensive and a little bit more extensive early in the outdoor season, just to get her back into it? Let the races be the races, race her in odd events that she doesn't normally race in, um, and then bring her back into competition season, later in the year, to her event, her preferred event, which is the 400. Um, and then in the weight room too, something that Bob said the other day about tapering down on the eccentric stiffness stuff and leading into championship season, if we're looking at 4 weeks prior to that, prior to state, and only focusing on fast, heavy concentric work,
Yeah.
which I normally didn't do. We would have a combination, right? We would
Yeah.
do we would do really heavy concentric work all the way leading up until the week of conference, but we always kept the stimulus of like reactive, some sort of reactive work in the weight
Yeah.
room. Um, but maybe just removing all reactive work in the weight room and just keeping it flat out velocity, moving heavy weight as fast as possible, concentric um, actions. Maybe that could give her what she needs towards the end of the season. Um, but so that's where I think the misses that I had with that girl specifically were in that didn't manage her emotional and mental training as good as she could have, as good as it could have been in the beginning of the outdoor season, so that she's
Wow.
primed to the end. But then, our top 200, 100, 200 girl is she ran 20, she ended up running 2480 something in the 200, first, like, second girl in school history to ever go 20, sub 25, took
Yeah.
fourth in pole vault, PR'd at state. And I was like, you know what? You tell me what you need for these last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I pulled her from the 100, which, could she have qualified in the finals in 100? Maybe. I mean, she was like a 12-2 girl, and it took 12 flat to qualify. So you're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, she didn't qualify in the finals with 24-8 in the 200. So she ended up taking 10th, and it's top nine in the finals.
That's
So,
that's fast.
and I was anticipating she was going to go 24-5.
Yeah.
So, with her, it's like, where could we have gone better? You're like, we're talking the 400 girl, 50, she went 57:44, and qualifying was 57:40. So, like, we're talking like, hundreds and thousands of a second here differences in what I expected these girls to do versus what they did. So,
Yeah.
is it? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I missed, honestly. Could I have gone heavier, a little bit more volume, to make sure that these guys are, the kids were more conditioned? You look at Femke, who runs like, basically trains like an 800-meter runner,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you look at our system in the U.S., who 400-meter runners are not doing that unless they're in the, like Clyde Hart style. I'm not
Yeah.
here to debate that stuff.
Not
So
gonna get a lot of debate out of me on
yeah,
that.
but part of me thinks, I'm thinking about it like, you just got to know your athlete at that point.
Yeah.
This
I,
this our 400-meter girl is like, she really, really, truly is an 800 girl. I
yeah.
genuinely think she's an 800 girl that over the last 2 years we needed to get faster, and now over the next 2 years we could add on some aerobic conditioning to her speed, and she could go sub 210 in the eight,
Yeah.
just because she's fast and has natural capacity.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think
So
I
that's
think you're managing so many variables though. Like you I think if you're missing by hundreds and thousands of a second, you're still scoring 90% plus on the test. Like at that point, like four 100 to me, 4/100ths of a second at the state meet in the 400 is like I farted before the race or I waited till after.
Yeah.
Like, that's the difference, you know?
Yeah.
And I think when you're talking high school athletes, I'm not even going to say high school girls because when I coached boys, it was the same thing. Your their control over emotional expenditure is non-existent,
Yeah.
and your control over any of that is even further removed. So, there's the how much that, and then when you throw a whole other sport on there, that's
Yeah.
that's an that's an uncontrollable variable. Actually, I got a text about her. Someone's asking me about her.
Who?
Your
Can't say.
400. Yeah.
Oh, you can't. You
Oh,
can't say
who sent
who.
it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It's all right.
a
Off
coach.
screen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, well,
Asking if what her deal is and where she's gonna be in.
the
You know her
so
at all? Yeah, I was like, I know of
um
her. So,
well my biggest concern is like, all right, so our girl indoors, our 200 girl, I barely raced her indoors really. 100, 200. She ran. I mean, she ran in the 55. It was a 7:17, which would convert
yeah,
to like a sub 7:30 in the 60. Um, so she ran really well indoors for that, but she got sick a whole bunch for like 3 weeks straight. She was sick, so I didn't race her a lot indoors. So
yeah,
expectation per outdoors was sub 25, but 24.5 to make final. So that
yeah,
was what I anticipated. But to go 57.77 indoors for our 400 girl and outdoors only go to 57.40. That's where I'm like, where did I miss? Why did she not go 57 sub 57 um in that? And but we also I have um our our second fastest 400-meter runner was, I mean, she was a jumper for freshman sophomore year, converted to a 400-meter runner this year, and she was consistently splitting 58s in the 4x4. I never raced her in an open four because she was like our our the girl that held our 4x2 together. Um,
yeah,
so, but she was racing awesome and was not training as a 400-meter runner. It wasn't until like 6 weeks prior to outdoor state that I was like, all right, we need to start building into this 400 a little bit better. She was racing 4x2s and 4x4s basically all outdoors, so that was her 400-meter training. And again, she was splitting like 58s high. In the open, she went 59. I want to say 59.6. So that's the positive. Like a girl
yeah,
that was a freshman, sophomore long triple jumper now is a 59, 48 or 58 split girl.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, scatter shot is kind of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Aim at the target, hope you
Yeah.
hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there's I don't, I've not watched enough lacrosse to be able to be like, yeah, this is the stimulus. I'm assuming it's close to soccer, stimulus wise.
Yeah. You assume it within a game. She plays basically the whole game, and she's a midi, which is like a midfielder in soccer. You're
Hmm.
getting a lot of extensive tempo work, meaning like you're running 50s and 60s at 70-80%, just running up and down the field, but then you're getting a
Yeah,
ton of deceleration and acceleration. Like if
yeah,
she makes a break, that's 20-meter acceleration where she's going all out.
yeah,
So, when she plays a game, you're talking 30 to 50, to 30 to 40 accelerations all out at 20 meters on turf. So really muscular, like a real taxing thing to do, pushing off hard in that acceleration. So I made the assumption she's getting enough of the acceleration stimulus. Now, is it mechanically effective? No, it's not what we want on the track, but at least she's getting that stimulus. So I'm not going to do that in training. So I removed that from
yeah,
her training. And what we focused on was intensive tempo work, just needing to understand how to run between 300 and 400 meters all out. And then our max velocity stimulus, just so that that was always there, and then exchanges. And a lot of the times our max velocity I just turned into exchanges because
Yeah.
that's it. I only had her 3 days a week. She had games, she had competitions. So when we were doing accelerations, I'm like, all right, you're coming in for 50 meters out. So now we can at least
Yeah.
hit that max V stim and then get some
Yeah.
acceleration or some thing. But that's also like we didn't really have a speed development day with her. Maybe every 2 weeks was she doing a true, 80 to 110 or like, 90-meter ish speed development workout.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a tough, like, I think I would almost just race model at that point. Like I don't, you know,
Yeah.
if I get one clean workout with you, it's going to be a race model. And um because I think especially at the high school level, the the deal at the state meet is you can tell who's going to win on the curve based on
Yeah.
whose shoulders are hunched up, who looks tight, and who looks composed. Um, and I get into it with a few coaches here and there where they want to give me the business about, oh, you got to train lactic, you got to train lactic, and from a energy system standpoint, you don't even in the 800, you don't have time to do any lactic clearance. So like lactic clearance is not a part of 400-meter running.
Yeah.
It's not a part of 800-meter running, and it's barely a part of mile running. Like the ability to clear lactate or
Yeah.
what let's the scientist in me is like, don't call it that.
Yeah.
So stop saying that. The how do people interpret this is like that's what we call it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, my philosophy on the four has always been once you're in outdoor season, it's and the four and the eight is it's acidosis management.
Yeah.
Like it hurts with 120 to go, no matter what, and you literally cannot do anything about it. Like in the eight, you can delay it. In the mile, you might be able to buffer it. In the four, there's no buffering, there's no delaying, there's only tolerating.
Yeah.
And so I always just had a true race model like philosophy for outdoor season. My 800-meter guys hated this workout because I tried to train them. One of the things we were really proud of is all of my 800-meter guys could run 51 or better in the four at the
Yeah.
high school level. And so we would try to make the 4x4 the same team as the 4x8.
Yeah.
Um, and now I never told the other coaches that.
Yeah.
But that was always on the 800 side, like for getting the high school guys engaged and like, coach, I don't want to run the 4x4. I just ran the 4x8 and the open eight. And like, yeah, I know, but let's make the championship 4x4 also the 4x8.
Yeah.
And we would run uh Ernie Clark does a version of this, but we would run cut down threes. So 3 sets of 300s. Your first 300 is like mile pace. So I had
Mm.
they were distance guys. I had a mile pace on them. The second 300 was exactly on your 800 pace. The third 300 was your 800 like minus 3 seconds,
Okay.
then divided by two to get a quarter pace. And that was set one, and then you get a big rest. And then you come back and you do it again, take a big rest, and come back and do it again. Ernie Clark does a like what was his? It was 3 200s, and it was target second 200-meter pace. So if you're trying to run 56, you're gonna open, and I just replayed the 200, and it wasn't even close. Wow.
I haven't watched anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it wasn't close. So he would say, so if you're gonna run a 56, you have to open in, gosh, what's that gonna be? That's 28, 28. So you're probably opening in a 25 to 26 for a woman. No, 26 to
Yeah.
27.
Yeah, you got
You
to be around
come
there, like 26 high.
26 high, you come back in a 29 or a 30. So your goal is a 30 or 29 mid on your second 200. So he would go rep one is 35, rep two is 32 to 33, rep three is 29. Set one done. Take a rest, repeat it.
These are
And just
300s. Like,
200s.
oh, you said 200.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so targeting the model of what do you have to run that second 200 in the 400
Yeah.
and tire yourself out with the first two and then come back and run that third one.
Yeah.
So
What's
it's high
your
volume.
rest on something like that? Yeah, if the 800-meter runners, like, that's appropriate,
He
right?
was
12.
doing well, he was doing it for his fours, and his fours, I think
Oh,
he was
okay.
yeah, he was giving him like he said his best athletes like Miles Pringle, uh, Trevor Bassett got to 3 sets. Most athletes do 2 sets.
Yeah.
Um, because if you're running slow at any point, you're missing it and
Yeah.
stop.
And what rest period are you talking? Like, are we talking 3 to 5 minutes between 200s and then full recovery between sets, or
He
even shorter, 90 seconds between each?
he was saying he would start out 2 to 3 minutes between reps, and rather than adding volume, he would just cut rest between reps. So one week
Yeah.
would be 2 minutes, the next would be a minute 45, then a minute 30. But he said he gave full rest between sets. So 10 plus minutes, sometimes 15, sometimes 20. And it was full rest. Um, that's also a workout where anyone who's done it twice knows 20 minutes of rest is not better than 15.
Yeah.
So um so yeah, that was his thing is he wanted you to hit the times. So he gave you just enough rest to hit the times, and then his whole progression was we're gonna squeeze the rest out and try to live on a razor's edge of like hitting the times. And that was Bob's Bob and him talked about it together on a podcast. It was a great podcast. I shouldn't be referencing other ones because we're really the only podcast anybody needs anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly.
why would you go anywhere else? So, but he was taught Bob would do his 300-meter progression, which we saw in his 400-meter lecture on CoachTube. Go
Yeah.
to coachtube.com and find our lectures as well. So he would
Shameless plugs.
I have no shame.
Uh,
But he would do 300 progressions and Ernie just did 200 progressions. So
okay.
yeah, I did, mine was 800 geared, so it was 300s, but it was certainly higher volume than Bob ever did. But my guys were running 2,000 meters of meat, so it had to be. Um, but yeah, I think you're dealing with so many variables. I think it's the idea of like not cutting yourself slack for hundreds of a second as a coach is pretty unreasonable. But
No.
maybe that's why you're successful is
What?
you're unreasonable.
Yeah.
So
Perfection, my friend. Perfection.
so
Yeah, it just like, well, for me personally, I want to do right by them, make sure that they're getting the necessary thing. But there is a component of like, you don't really know, is this their genetic potential? Where are they at? I mean, this girl, I know it's not. Like, she has more to give, 100%. And it just finding out, where is that more? Is
yeah.
it in volume, and or is it in speed? And I think that,
I got to imagine if she's playing lacrosse during track season, it's not in volume.
yeah. And I think, if I can, if we're headed down that path, I've told her, she's a very high level lacrosse player, and where she would play lacrosse, and we'll see. She has offers out now. At the beginning of the year, we'll see. But if she's going to go for it in lacrosse in college, then go for track in high school and give it everything. Stop playing two sports and see
Yeah.
what you can do and what you're really capable of. I don't doubt
Yeah.
that this girl can go 55 mid, just with her mindset, her willingness to go into that really ugly place, the last
Mhm.
100 meters, and her abilities physically. It's just,
Yeah.
it's hard to manage those two sports and be high level. You could do it freshman and sophomore year because you weren't even close to where your
Yeah.
potential is. But now that you're getting into, the like last year, she made the finals with a 58-1 uh, as
Indoors?
a outdoors.
Okay.
So she went last year as a freshman. She went 58-1 to make finals in state. Took eighth. This year doesn't takes 10th. Doesn't make finals with a 57-4. So it was a very fast year,
Yeah.
really deep. But now you were a freshman and you were a sophomore. Now it's like upperclassmen. Your body's getting to a point where it's high performing. You're not
Yeah.
relying on talent. You now are pushing yourself past the talent barrier, and now you're actually relying on your training.
Yeah.
Uh,
Do you ever do in meets, do you ever set like a first 200 goal in like
no,
early season stuff where you're like, ah, this meet doesn't matter. Let's try to crater your second 200.
well, I told her so. My race strategy for these kids, for 400-meter kids at this level, I'm like, you need the first 50's got to be all out, and it takes us just all the indoor season just to get them to understand what that feels like.
Yeah, yeah,
So the entire indoor season, it's like first 50. So I'll give them a kind of a visual marker of where is that real, true first 50 in whatever lane you're in. And for them to really focus on that and be able to get out and understand what it feels like to hold the gas pedal rather than press the gas pedal all the way down. So that's like the only thing we talk about indoors is
yeah,
understanding that first 50. Now, with her now understanding that component and realizing how to run the race, I can start to focus on that. So late indoors last year, we were focusing on she needed to come through at 27 for the first 200.
mhm.
And she was only at that time, she was only a 26 low 200-meter run. So for her, that was fast coming through.
Yeah, yeah,
But that's when she first hit 58 indoors, was understanding how to come through at 27 and then just hang on. Because for her, our conference didn't have enough. The people that she was competing against weren't talented enough to be able to hold on with her,
yeah.
right? So she would have to run by herself a lot.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't usually, but with her I will this year because she's now understanding how to run the race
Yeah.
properly. Um, yeah, so that's like what I'm trying to figure out with that one.
Well,
Enough
you
about
remember
me.
Stacia,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I she was a coach's dream where for the four, we would early season meets, she would let me be really, really abusive. And I would say we would only talk about the first two. And it
yeah.
would be, all right, we're going to open in a 27 mid for this 200. That's your goal. And then the next one, it's all right, we're going to drop a second in the first 200 and try to open in a 26 mid. And she was not a 26-0 gal. Um, but the whole point was like, what does our differential become? And on a bad day, when she opened way too fast, she still closed
Yeah.
decent. And we could say, all right, now you know what too fast feels like. Back it off a little bit, but get close.
Hmm.
And I don't I was really lucky with her. I don't know how many athletes have the uh athletic IQ maybe to just be able to intuit like, oh yeah, okay, 26.5 is too fast for the first two.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I know what that felt like when I did that because also the second two felt really bad. But what does 27.6 feel like? And can I back off a little off of 26.5 and make it at least another 75 meters?
Yeah.
Um, and she was smart enough and she had the physical, she just had that intuition where we could say, okay, that was too fast, take it back a little bit, and let's see how deep you can run that into the curve, and then just finish. And she was good at that. So I'm super happy to like blow kids up on a Tuesday track meet and be like, yeah, man, just let's find out how fast too fast is.
Yeah.
Because every
Yeah.
now and then you come across the kid who was too timid and you're like,
Yeah.
and
Exactly. I mean,
I
that's how
saw this
most
with,
are.
yeah, and you'd see this with your more often than not, it's your women who are running 65, 66, and they're running 33, 33.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey man, blow this meet up. Like just blow up. Let's try to blow the wheels off. And I have to come like drag you off the track for the next heat. Like, let's
Yeah.
try to do that because I think you're being too timid.
Hmm.
With Stacia, that wasn't the case. We learned she wasn't being too timid. Um, but also, we pull the T.S. Eliot. Only those who risk going too far find out how far they can go.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
um, great on the track, bad in the weight room. Don't never use that philosophy
Yeah,
in the weight room.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
um, but yeah, I think that's a big thing is like how aggressive are you early? And I don't know the girl you're talking about on a personal level, so I can't say
Yeah,
she's aggressive enough early on, but I also think there's something to be said for like experiencing a real bad race where
yeah,
you're like, no, that was too fast, but now I know one, I can survive it. Like I can get through that. What a great training stimulus that was. And
yeah,
then also I can better identify how far I can go.
yeah. That's why I for us at almost every meet indoors we have the 300, and that's where I play with that. I'm like, hey, this is your opportunity. Just this is all out. Learn
Yeah.
what it feels like just to hit it like a 200 and see what
Yeah.
that next 100 feels like. So you that visual stimulus or the visual component of it is because like you're not coming through on a second lap. It's like, all right, here it is, final lap. You just
Yeah.
hit that first 100 as hard as you can, and then all right, final lap. This is what it should feel like at the end of a 400. Now we have to train that bit. Um,
Yeah.
Now clocking that last 200 would be interesting. Playing with the 300 and seeing what she could do in the last 200 or 300 uh, would be an interesting way to see if we can play with that a little bit more. Because then the
Yeah.
last 100 of the forwards, you just kind of survive at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so for you, same question. Do you have do you continue to have time?
What I get, yeah, I'm good. What I get
Okay,
right or what I get wrong?
both.
Uh,
Let's go with what you got right because that's a
this will be quick
more
then.
positive.
We're good. We'll be fast. uh, I think, um, on the jump side, we had our first two women over 18 feet in school history, peaked at the right time, did it at the conference meet. I have to guess that's the first time our team has ever gone 1-2 in a horizontal jump
Okay.
um at a conference championship. So that felt real right. Um a lot of that was a feeling of I'm not entirely sure what I did. So that's the problem.
That's one of those things. You're like, what happened? When did
Yeah.
where did it
Well,
was
we I
it
mean
just
we
me?
we slumped. I think more than anything, and I know this is gonna might grind your gears because it's back to culture, but the big thing we did is we kept our chins up when we took some shots, man.
Yeah,
Uh, those girls had great indoor seasons, and the first 4 to 5 weeks of outdoors, we just got pummeled. And then the last 2 weeks, they just exploded. So they kept their chins up and they trusted the process. And more than anything, I think that was kind of the thing that sealed the deal. But from a training standpoint, I think on the women's side in the long jump, we did really, really well. Um, I also do qualify that with the prelim round prior to my top two women jumping. I had two women who had the worst meets of their college careers. So I was in perfect balance that day. And I think that was not a me thing. That was we made some choices that we probably shouldn't have made
yeah,
lead to the conference championship. So and we paid the price for it as a team. Um, so from the long jump perspective, we did really, really well. Triple jump was a little more challenging. Um, if you're gonna go based off of how the championship went, it didn't go well on the women's side. It went okay on the men's side. So what we did well on the women's side is my woman who set the school record and won a conference championship. And I mean, we'd been talking for 15 months at that point about winning a conference championship.
Yeah.
Um, and her and I never said it to a single soul that that's what she was out to do. And I was, of course, coaching two of her teammates to beat her. So I don't bring up who I think is going to win. And honestly, on that day, I didn't know. But that was Friday. She sets the school record. She jumps 18 feet for the first time. She was a 16-foot jumper in high school. So as a sophomore, she jumped 18 feet. School record, conference championship, highest of highs.
Yeah.
Um, and then the next day, what I like to say happened is we filled a big balloon with positive emotions.
Yeah.
And then and it tired her out a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
And then when we had to come back and triple the next day, we still had this space of big emotion area available. And the moment things went south, we had all this room to fill it with negative.
Yeah.
Uh, the what I took from that though is one, we learned we're gracious in victory, we're gracious in defeat, and we do need to maintain a level of control. Because I mean, it was wild. Like she won, and it was the whole place was bananas. Like our first
Yeah.
girl jumps 18 feet, and like she's sobbing, and I'm crying, and then 6 jumps later, this girl goes 18 feet and beats her by 2 centimeters, and we're like, "What just happened? Oh my!" And I've got distance
Yeah.
guys feeding them. So it was wild, and we got way too high. Uh, and then the crash the next day was way too
Yeah.
big. But she was a grinder, and she showed up, man, and didn't have her best day, but showed up and jumped. So from a technical standpoint, though, I think the big thing we did really well
Just a
is
side note, you probably just do a little elderberry after a really high thing like that, and you could,
I
really
can't
bring
share
that
this
CNS
now.
back.
We gotta edit that out. Oh God. But no, that would have solved all my problems. Like Ricky's hamstring would have been fine if he was
Yeah, elderberry.
elderberry.
That's right.
I don't know
All
why
right,
he's
sorry to
still
cut you
alive.
off. I just,
That's,
I
that's a
feel
fair
I
point.
wanted to give you
Um,
an answer, a solution.
yeah. So on the women's side, I think the thing we did really well in long jump is we drilled we drilled intensive plyos a lot early. So indoor season, we progressed from
You said intensive bios?
yeah,
Intensive. Okay.
yeah. So we progressed from kind of standard uh rudiment jumps to making part of our day was then 2 jump days a week were hurdle jumps. Um, I think I would change. I'm changing this year. The hurdle jumps got higher for my horizontal jumpers. I think the solution is hurdle jumps should go lower and faster.
Yeah.
But we did that. They got higher, and then we weight vested them, and then we kind of stayed on it in terms of like I think of long jump. We want to load that spine. We want to load that gravity, like gravity. This is just how my brain sees it. Is we want to overdo gravity
Yeah.
and we want to release gravity. And so we did a lot of like plate drills, like A skips with plates over our heads, just constantly working that stiffness.
Yeah.
And and I took my high jump or my triple jump target mats. So they're probably 3/4 inch, maybe an inch high. Um, Probably 3 feet by 2 feet. So they take up a whole lane, but they're about 3 feet long. Uh, when we bought our rollout indoor track, the tracks came on these mats, and I probably used these little mats more than I used the track itself. Um, and so what we did is then we worked a lot of short approach jump, stepping up on the ultimate step with no resistance or anything. So I think we managed like creating stiffness and the feeling of stiffness and like strengthen that position. And then when they jumped, we stepped up into our ultimate step and created that feeling of rising a little bit more, not a huge amount more.
Yeah.
And then we drove speed the whole season. And I think they were fast at the end of the season. And this is the first time that was something I was dedicated to last year is we were lights out indoors every year, and then we would lose speed going into outdoors because I would just run out of time. I would drill jumping too much.
Okay.
So we jumped a little bit less and drilled speed a little bit more. So they were able to still be fast at the end of the season. And I think that made the difference is we
Yeah.
still had some speed. And then on the
And this
men's side,
was this strictly with your horizontal jumpers, not vertical?
no, no, my notes on the verticals are going to be all negative. So, and not because of them. But no, on the horizontals, we drove speed a lot more. On the triple jump on the men's side, we did a lot better than we have in the past. So we had our first 14-meter triple jumper in the 21st century. Last time it was done was like 1991. Had our first freshman who he jumped over 13 meters. He didn't mark it. He jumped, I think it was like 15 centimeters behind the board and still jumped 1280 something. So it was a big, he was way behind the board, but it was a huge
Yeah.
jump, and he was the first like freshman in my time here who has had a jump that big. Um, and that was we spent a ton of time targeting. Um, I had my two mats, and we spent probably 12 weeks where we would put
Oh
out,
wow.
yeah, we would target jump, and it would start out, we'd get 3 target jumps in and we're done. Plyo sets outside of that, but our meat was like the target jumping, take off the board. You have a takeoff zone, you take off, and then I have them spaced, and I have them spaced at typically 36%, 30%, 34%, which most triple jump coaches will tell you, shut up, you shouldn't do it that way because some jumpers are jump heavy, some jumpers are hop heavy, almost no jumpers are step heavy. And truly Ricky, my top jumper, he's very jump dominant. So, but I would go, my philosophy was, well, if I can help him open his hop up and slow it down so
Yeah.
it's a bigger hop, we can manage a good step. He's gonna be jump dominant at the end of the day anyway. So like, why don't I target a 36, put him at a 49-foot jump, targeting 36% in the hop? We come up short. He's going to jump dominate and be a little bit bigger anyway. So that was kind of my thinking behind it. I think I've shifted that a little bit this year. We're going to be a little more specific to him. But yeah, that was our big thing is I progressed the target jumping we did it in the fall, and then we progressed it again mid indoor all the way through outdoor. Um, and that progression I think made a big difference. So they had a
Yeah.
pretty decent season. Um, so I think those are my two things is like maintaining speed, and the horizontal jumps was a big focus for me because we had lost speed so much all season, and then giving them opportunities to like really go for target jumping. They loved it. Like that was a thing they genuinely asked for it. And I think when an athlete asks you to do something, you take it seriously
Yeah.
because there's a reason they're asking you. Um,
Hmm.
and I found that when we did that, then they worked really, really hard those days. So I did put hard limits on how many they could take, and then I started spacing them out more because as they jumped bigger, they worked harder.
Yeah.
It took more out of them. So now it's like, okay, now we're going to continue progressing it, but we're going to go to every other week, or I'm only going to give you 2 target jumps this week, and then we're just going to go to plyos. So that was I was a little more disciplined in that,
So
but
what do
uh,
you what do your target drills look like?
it's a short approach triple jump. Um, and it is I put a board down, I run a tape, so I put a cone in the sand, I
Okay.
run a tape back, and then I have the math written on my phone and notes of what everybody's first, second, and third phase should cover. And I put my 3 foot by 2 foot mats down on the runway at their where they land their second phase,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
and
Got it.
then
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
where they land their first phase, where they land their second phase. So they have a big range.
Yeah.
And sometimes I cheat it back so they think they hit a thing they didn't. Um, but and also because if you don't land all the way on the mat, that's a little rough on your foot and your Achilles.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it became very competitive for them. And then I added we just went straight to I threw Path's rip sets in there, his rip jump series.
Yeah.
And that was all right, we're gonna do you get 2 target jumps, and then we're gonna just go rip. And I would literally walk away. And every time we did target jumps plus rip, when it came to the rip sets, they would do standing triples, and it just turned into we're going to start at the 28 board in standing triple. Now let's move to the 32.
Yeah.
Now let's move to
Okay.
the 36.
Yeah.
Who's making it in the 40? Like,
Yeah.
and I let him do it. I'm not there to. That was one of those. I'm like, I'm not going to coach this. Like, you guys just be intense. I coach your target jumps, and then intensity is the order of the day after that. So that was what we did. I think that was what we did really well. Kind of consistently feeding them a little bit of overload most of the season with weight vests, with more challenging jumps. Depth jumps progressed. So we went from um, drops twice a week to drops once a week, and then just land and jump to land and jump once a week, land and jump over a hurdle the other session, to weighted drops, land and
Okay.
jump over hurdle. And then I started mixing in single leg drop 1 week, 1 day of the week, jump over hurdle the next day. So I never did weighted drop jumps, which I don't think you need to.
Yeah.
So, so that progression went really, really well too. Um, Now high jump was an entirely different story. This is probably the worst year of high jump I've ever coached in my life. And it was not the athletes for the most part. I introduced a lot of new elements to them. So we did a lot more gymnastics work. We did a lot more time inverting
Yep.
than we usually do. But we spent too much time high jumping, and we did not spend enough time. Like they became, and this has happened in the past, but I've adjusted quicker. They became the best technical jumpers at every single meet. Like, you would watch them at the low bars, their opening heights, and you're watching kids who you're like, oh my God, that's great. And then they would get to the high bars and they're still technically proficient, but they're not jumping high enough.
Yeah.
And then the people they're getting beat by are athletes who are just, hosses hitting the ground and getting up. And I did not dose them enough. Like, we didn't do almost any of the strength stuff we should have done. And that
But
was
like what?
we should have been spending a lot more time. I think they should have held a much longer single leg, low lunge eccentric or isometric positions. Like, we should have, like, the amount of time we spent in that position was strictly takeoffs.
Got it.
We did not do any iso lunge holds. We did not do enough single leg eccentric holds. Or eccentric lifts. Almost the only time they got exposed to that knee angle and driving out of it was when they were actively jumping.
Hmm.
And that was a big mistake on my part. So
Okay.
my top girl coming in this year, she's top two girls. One is going to be a much better jumper. She had a really hard freshman year because she was hurdling and high jumping. And she dropped over a second in the hurdles, in the
Shit.
100 hurdles.
The 110's tap.
Yeah. So, like, the difference in speed between who she was in high school and who she was as a freshman in college, the high jump becomes an entirely different event.
Absolutely.
Like, she got so fast every single week, and there's only so far away from the pit a kid can get before they're like, what the hell are you doing, coach?
Yeah.
Like,
So it's interesting that you say that, because this is why I asked if you implemented speed into the vertical jumpers like through the year. I was listening to another podcast. We don't need to mention it because, again, like you said, it's no. But so Joel Smith was talking about how um, who was it? I can't remember, but it was a high jump coach that said if your athletes get too fast, that will hinder their performance. Right? They start to become too reactive off the ground. They don't spend enough time on the ground to allow the necessary positions. Um, so that's why I asked that. Is there that there's a very fine balance between that. Now, 100 hurdles, like you're talking about a girl that gets a ton of plyometric contacts just coming off hurdles and
Yeah.
has to understand how to change shin angles to go from horizontal to vertical just to penetrate a hurdle.
Yeah.
Um, but
I,
yeah,
I would say it was even more basic than that. Just she didn't get coached on any curve discipline in high
okay,
school. And it's not a knock on a high school coach. That's a really challenging thing to coach at any level. And if you are not dedicated to the high jump, it's just not going to happen.
yeah,
Um, so on an even more basic level, she didn't know how to distribute her curve. And when
okay,
you're 18 and 19 years old and you're running the hurdles a lot and getting faster every time you do it, that's a success and you're really excited about that. But then the main event you came to do, which is the high jump, gets harder every time you do it. And truthfully, a good curve distribution for her basically was going to be different every single week because she was faster every single week.
yeah,
So that was I probably should have just told her to be slower or moved her to taking 2, 3 steps off her approach. So that was a big mistake. And then my other gal who is um, the best technical jumper I think I've ever coached, the most consistent approacher. Her approach was spot on all year. She does not get after it in the weight room. Um, she's like, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna hit like 60% of effort.
hmm,
And when you're trying to high jump and you're trying to make the jump from 5 feet to 5'4", like you pretty much you gotta blow your legs out at some point, like or challenge yourself really heavily in the weight room, or have a coach who's gonna have you in isometric holds or eccentric holds. And I didn't do those two things, and she didn't challenge herself on the concentric part.
yeah,
So between the two of us, we didn't get the job done. She's just got to get stronger in that takeoff position because her approach is perfect almost every time. It's like write down what you want a high jump approach to be, like crescendo rhythm, reactive on the back end, faster foot contacts, more time in the air, great curve, like leaning from the ankles. Like she did all of it. But when she put her left foot on the ground and tried to push the ground away to get over the bar, she couldn't produce enough force to do it.
yeah,
She was beautiful over the bar every time. She could make the adjustments. She just couldn't produce force. And you know, that was my failure on the women's side. On the men's side, whole different mess. That was got a I had a one male who was like 6'7", maybe 6'4", 6'5". Like I felt very successful with him. He ran like Bambi at the start of the year, and by the end of the year, he was actually running approaches. Like, I mean, the kid was pretend you woke up and you were 6'5" tomorrow, or you had added 8 inches to your height.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's how he ran every day. Everything he did was like that. And I was like,
Awesome.
you watch him and you're like, I don't even know. Like 10 steps, 5 steps might be too many for you to get to the bar. Like, I don't know if you can execute 5. And so he had a good approach at the end of the year. We just ran out of time.
Yeah.
My other guy was a football player, and this has been the bane of my existence with football players. We get really good during indoor. He put 3 feet on his triple jump. He put like 2.5 feet on his long jump. He put 4 inches on his high jump. And then spring ball started,
Oh, of
and
course.
we got worse at everything.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And it was it was a great example of there is a stark difference between how you should lift as a track athlete in season,
Yeah, of
how
course.
you should lift as a football player off season. And I'm not saying lifting like a football player off season is wrong, but it is not conducive to athleticism.
100%.
And so
100%.
you saw him go from like, I mean, there were days he literally showed up and he would get to the pit and he would stop and just fall because he's like, I literally cannot right now jump off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so we're being positive. So I told him I was pretty hard on him. I was like, man, I don't know if I should even have you high jump next year. I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with you. And he's like, Coach, I want to compete for you because you're the only what unsaid, you're the only one whose ADD can match mine. So you're the only one who understands. Like, and and I was like, you know what? Screw it. We're just gonna sprint long jump.
Yeah.
Whole player, that's all we're gonna do. He's got a high jump. I need a high jumper. So what I'm changing is like I need to accept the stimulus he's getting in football,
Yeah.
and we're gonna
It's just
probably only.
like yeah, that's so tough because that sport is so different. What position does he play?
He's a D back.
All right, so you get a little bit less of the like heavy ground contact. He's going to be a little bit more elastic, a little springier. But they like, and that's where offensive linemen, defensive linemen, maybe some linebackers, those guys should be fucking putting in work in the weight room,
Yeah,
heavy lifts. In the
yeah,
offseason, these DBs, wide receivers, running backs, they don't need to lift the way these offensive linemen do. And
yeah,
a lot of these programs, it's like, all right, we're just going to all lift. And
yeah.
if you're not lifting heavy, you're not moving like properly. So it's just so frustrating at that point. But
It's
yeah, that's
they have and I'm not a football guy, so I don't know if this is valid or not. And I've done my logic on it, but it's certainly coming from a track perspective. They have we're undersized, we need to get bigger.
yeah,
And I'm like, what if he was just like, you're begging, the football coaches are begging me to send a couple of my jumpers to their team.
yeah,
And I'm like, those guys are not bigger.
no,
They're just so athletic.
yep,
They're fast
yeah,
and powerful. I'm like, so what's the deal with the guys who are already on your team needing to get bigger when the guys you want from my team are fast and athletic? Like, why don't you let those guys be fast and athletic too?
yeah.
So, and this could be a philosophy thing. I have no clue. I don't do football. I don't have, I played it and I was like, good, I'm good on it. You walk into a locker room and see one coach dancing naked and you're like, that's it. Football's not for me.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the culture of football in general, size does matter for certain positions. Strength, I think, is way more important, and size and strength have been confused. I think
yeah,
you can
yeah,
be insane. I mean, track and field athletes are the epitome of small and strong as hell,
yeah,
powerful, like depending on the time of year. And then you're looking at, we're talking, let's say a sprinter. That's what a DB should be, you know. But then you look at the hosses of track and field, and you're looking at hammer throwers and
yeah,
shot putters, and those dudes are athletic, super
yeah,
athletic, strong, and powerful.
yeah.
So why would that not be your comparison? Why would that not be the thing? And size never really matters unless you're throwing around implements, which is
Yeah.
what offensive, defensive, and linemen and linebackers are doing. But the
I
rest of the
think
game and running backs, fullbacks.
so running backs I get. You got to be able to take a hit.
Yeah,
And the smaller you are, the harder that is. I think
but
the thing I
really,
don't
but like no, no,
yeah,
like what I'm saying really is like the size at from 180 to 185. That these, if you're a running back and you think that between when fall balls or when football ends, if you're not lifting from the moment that the season ends, let's say call it November, December for that
yeah,
Division 3 level,
yeah,
you're not putting on more than 5 pounds to 10 pounds of muscle
yeah.
by the time the next season comes around. And that
And
means like you are hammering the weights.
And that's I think that's my biggest question is that's a 7 month, 8 month period, December to
Yeah.
August. You know, you if you're making your athlete less athletic in January and February, are you progressing that same? And this is we need to get a football guy on here and just like bury him or something. But are you progressing that same lifting program for 8 months?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I genuinely don't. Um, but so moving forward, kind of my philosophy with this kid is you show up twice a week. We're gonna set an approach for you. We're gonna work on an approach. And then the other day is I think we're gonna just do Eldoa. We're gonna do mobility, like get the kid
Yeah.
feeling good because he
Yeah.
just felt terrible all outdoor season, and he should be a 6'3", 6'4" jumper,
Yeah.
and he's jumping 5'8" because he's on Wednesday he literally cannot get his foot to leave the ground on takeoff.
Hmm.
He just is, there's a hilarious. I got a reel on my Instagram of him like trying to. He was funny. He liked to try to like put me in headlocks. And one of the days, the best he could do is like crawl on the ground to try to get me. And I'm like, I'm videoing this because for later. So I think what I'm changing is I'm going to try to be more understanding of demands outside of track and say like you don't have to do my thing all the time and let's just try to get you feeling good so you can perform and frankly enjoy track more.
Yeah.
Because even at this level, if you don't enjoy it, we're not gonna probably not gonna get much better. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think the things I did a few things right. I think I did a lot of things wrong. And I spent the summer like really I'm trying to get more into that. I never understood Boo's training menu when I was 26 years old. I didn't get like why do you have a sheet of paper with all these circuits on it and all these
Hmm.
sequences on it? And now the idea of, and that was because I was coaching high schoolers. I'm like, I need to be there for everything you do.
Yeah.
Now that I'm coaching college athletes, and we have a culture of athletes who can can lead and can understand what they're are capable of understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it without me being there all the time. The menu items, astounding. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
so
Absolutely.
I have a giant menu now of like just circuits, options, where I can now say, pick an option out of this box and do 20 of them. And multi throws. I got multi throws and I dictate multi throws. So maybe we say like pedestal routine.
Yeah.
Pick two movements and do 60 seconds of each movement in this pedestal routine to end your day.
Hmm.
And then what we do and what I coach matters more, and it's more focused. And because I have found the more we are doing the things the kids love to do when they're asking me, with the exception of high, this is what I did wrong with high jumpers. Here it is. Here's the goal. Here's the number one thing I did wrong with high jumpers. I listened to high jumpers. Um, and I
Yes.
learned all high jumpers want to do
It's not.
is
Yeah.
high jump.
100%.
So,
In that case, just tell them, all right, you're going to do it from the opposite side as much as you want. Do it from
yeah.
the opposite side. Then you'll see some real learning happening.
Yeah, yeah. So that was
Right.
I was like, oh man, I'm gonna really like, because my high jumpers are moody. I don't know if that's just me and who I recruit, but 7 years, my high jumpers have always been moody. And like, oh, we're sprinting today, and they go mope for 10 minutes. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, and it's not one high jumper, it's not one person doing this, it's the whole group every time.
Yeah.
So I finally hit I was like, all right, we're gonna do everything high jump centric. Like I'm gonna have them
Yeah.
at a mat every day, and you can't do that.
No.
So that was
It's the basketball player that always wants to dunk. It's the same
yes,
thing. They don't actually want to learn how to do anything else. They just want to dunk. That's
yes,
it. And there's just some gratification about jumping over something that's high.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't get that same, it's same thing with vaulters. It's the idea of clearing that bar versus horizontal jumpers. They don't really get it because there's no obstacle that they're
yeah,
overcoming.
Yeah.
hurdlers only want to hurdle, but they want to do like all the hurdle drills. They don't
Yes.
actually want to race hurdles,
No,
you know?
no. Don't put 10 hurdles on the track.
Yeah,
Give
no,
me
we
three
want to,
hurdles. Yeah.
exactly. I'm going to be really awesome at the first three hurdles. And then what about the rest?
Oh, or how about Jav?
Oh, yeah.
No one wants to jab drill, and no one wants to
No,
jab strength train,
no.
but they want to see the jab
Yep.
into the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's so satisfying. I want to see it go up, float, and
Yep.
stab into the ground.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that's what I did wrong is I listened to high jumpers.
Yeah. And on that note,
Yeah. Yeah, you probably gotta go. I gotta
all
go, I
right.
think too.
All right, cool. Yeah, so let's get back at it. We're next week. I'm
Next
excited
week,
to talk
part
to Bob
two.
next week. Yeah. Um,
Teaser. Here's our teaser.
yep,
If you
part
like part
two,
one,
this the speed power athlete with Bob Thurnholm.
should we say things like share this with people? No,
No,
okay.
no one's getting here. No one's getting to the
That's
end of
fair.
this thing. There's yeah.
All right.